The sound of paper rustling was louder than the crowd outside. I stood on the porch, folder open, neighbors watching like it was a trial. Mark Hughes, my son-in-law, had his face burning crimson as Emily, my daughter, whispered, "Just sign it." His hand shook, the pen digging into the paper. Earlier that week I had baked a chocolate cake, Emily's favorite. I imagined surprising her after Mark's big promotion dinner, maybe catching a smile from Lily and Noah, my grandchildren, frosting smeared on their cheeks. But instead of gratitude that night, I got laughter in my face, a toast raised to my failure. I stayed silent. I didn't flip the table, didn't storm out. I smiled, nodded, and walked away. But that silence? It was the sound of the ground opening beneath them. And now here we were, their lies laid bare. Nearly $1 million in receipts fluttered in the evening wind, neighbors gasping, children clutching their mother's hands. And Mark, the man who once mocked me as a loser, was forced to read his apology out loud. You may be wondering how a simple family dinner led to this moment, where pride was shattered and truth could no longer hide. Before I take you into the full story, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next gripping stories like this one. Mark Hughes had booked the restaurant to celebrate his promotion. White linen, chandeliers, Bordeaux breathing at his elbow. He called it a family night. But the way he stretched in his chair, cufflinks flashing in the light, it was clear. This was his victory lap. The waiter pulled out Emily's chair first. She smiled politely, but her fingers never stopped circling the rim of her glass. Lily swung her legs under the table, tapping against the wood. Noah pushed peas with the back of his fork, pretending not to notice the tension already coiling in the air. The place was packed with suits and dresses, the hum of conversation blending with faint jazz. Every few minutes, someone would pass by and clap Mark on the shoulder. "Congratulations, Mark. Couldn't have happened to a better man. Promotion already? Must be that drive of yours." Another leaned toward me with a smile that was meant to be kind. "David, you must be proud. Having a son-in-law like this, self-made, climbing so high." I nodded once, forcing a thin smile. My fingers brushed the watch on my wrist. Its steady tick was louder than their words. Mark soaked it in. He tipped his glass toward them, the Bordeaux glinting like a jewel. "To success," he said. "To building something out of nothing." Nothing. I nearly laughed at the word. I thought of the mortgage payments, the tuition, the bills, all the invisible scaffolding holding up this little empire. The waiter served the steaks. The smell of butter and char should have filled me with hunger, but all I tasted was metal. Emily tried to steer conversation elsewhere. "Dad, did you see Lily's art project? But Mark cut her off, leaning forward, his grin wide. "David," he said, loud enough for two nearby tables to hear, "don't you ever miss being relevant?" Emily's hand froze around her fork. "Mark, please." But he wasn't done. His smirk sharpened, his words oiled by wine. "Come on. How does it feel, watching younger men succeed while you just fade?" My knife slipped, screeching across porcelain. Lily jumped. Mark chuckled, mistaking silence for surrender. One of his colleagues, emboldened by the moment, lifted his glass. "To Mark," he said. "Proof hard work pays off." Emily glanced at me, pleading without words. Noah's eyes darted between us, small fists balled tight in his lap. The watch ticked steady, each beat like a countdown. 15 years of silence pressed on my chest. Every tuition check, every medical bill, every indulgence Mark paraded as his own. Grace's voice whispered from memory, frail and fading. "Promise me, David. Keep her safe. Safe." Was this safety? Watching Emily shrink, watching the children flinch at their father's laughter? Mark raised his glass again, savoring the moment like a performer dragging out applause. "So tell me," he asked, "how does it feel to be a loser?" The word landed heavy, sucking the air out of the room. Emily's fork clattered to her plate. Lily's eyes welled. Noah whispered, "Dad, Stop. I lifted my water glass, deliberate, controlled. Condensation slipped down my hand. I met Mark's eyes. "How does it feel?" I said calmly. "To know this loser won't be paying your bills anymore." The silence cracked louder than thunder. Mark's grin collapsed. Emily froze mid-breath. The children stared, sensing the ground shift beneath them. I folded my napkin carefully, set it beside the untouched steak, and stood. Bending down, I kissed Lily and Noah on their heads. "Dinner was nice," I told Emily softly. "Thank you." And I walked out. The whispers of strangers chased me through the restaurant. Outside, the night smelled of rain and hot asphalt. My watch ticked steady against my wrist, marking the exact second 15 years of silence ended. The rain had already started by the time I pulled into my driveway. It tapped against the gutters, soft but relentless, like a reminder that silence only builds before it breaks. Downtown lights still glimmered in my rearview mirror, the restaurant's chandeliers shrinking to pinpricks. I could still taste the tannin of the expensive wine Mark had ordered, feel the echo of his laughter vibrating in my chest. The smell of wet asphalt followed me inside. I hung my coat, loosened my tie, and stood in the hallway, listening to the echo of an empty house. Since Grace passed, this place had always felt too large. Tonight, it felt hollow, like a stage after the actors have left. I moved slowly to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stood there in the dim glow of the microwave clock. My reflection stared back from the window, older and harder than the man who sat across from Mark tonight. The watch on my wrist ticked steadily, and for the first time in years, its sound didn't soothe me, it accused me. I walked straight to the study, the one room no one else bothered with. The lamp clicked on, spilling amber light across the mahogany desk. Shadows pooled in the corners like secrets waiting to be told. The scent of paper and old leather filled my nose, comforting once, now suffocating. I slipped the old wristwatch from my wrist, the same one Grace had given me on our 10th anniversary, and set it gently on the desk. The glass was scratched, the leather worn, but its ticking was steady, louder now than it had been at dinner, as if it had carried the weight of every insult with me. I pulled open the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. It groaned, tired from years of carrying what I never dared show anyone. Neat rows of folders sat there, color-coded, patient. I had organized them carefully over 15 years, as if preparing for a moment I hadn't admitted would come. Mortgage payments first, every month, without fail. Then medical bills. Emily's recovery after Lily's birth, Noah's broken arm, braces, therapy. Next came tuition checks, insurance premiums, summer camps, and finally, the one that stung more than the rest. The BMW lease Mark had insisted on, the car he paraded like a crown he never earned. I laid them out across the desk, paper overlapping like cards in a gambler's hand. Each one carried the faint smell of ink and time. Looking at them, I could almost hear the scratch of my pen, the sigh of a checkbook closing, the quiet lie I had repeated to myself, that I was protecting them. The last folder was the heaviest. Grace's handwriting across the front, family expenses, faded, curved letters, softer than mine ever were. I flipped to the last page. Total, $96,200. My eyes clung to the number. Nearly $1 million, gone into a life they thought they'd built themselves. Vacations, schools, cars, dinners, all under my name, while Mark raised glasses in my face and called me irrelevant. I leaned back. The chair creaked under my weight. The watch ticked steady beside the files. And then her voice came back. The one I tried so long to bury. It wasn't just the hospital I remembered. It was the weeks leading to it. One night, years earlier, Grace and I had sat on this very bed after Emily and Mark had left. She'd pressed her fingers to her temples, eyes shadowed. "She's not ready for life on her own," she said. "She leans on you too much. On us." I had bristled. "She's our daughter. We're supposed to be there for her." "There's being there," Grace answered, her voice firm but sad. And then there's carrying her. If we carry her forever, she'll never stand. I turned away that night, muttering that she was being too hard on Emily. Months later, the hospital room smelled of antiseptic and wilted flowers, a mixture that clung to my clothes long after I left. Machines hummed steadily beside her bed, each beep a countdown I couldn't stop. Grace's skin felt paper-thin in my hand, her pulse fluttering against my fingers. The lamp above her cast a yellow circle, leaving the rest of her room in half-shadow, as if even the light didn't want to intrude on goodbye. "David," she whispered, pausing to catch her breath. "Promise me. Don't let Emily struggle. She's not as strong as she thinks she is." I remember leaning close, swallowing the knot in my throat. "Anything, Grace." "I promise." Her lips curved into a faint smile, tired but trusting. She closed her eyes, and the beeping slowed. My chest ached with the weight of those words, even then, but I clung to them like a lifeline. I left the hospital that night with the smell of bleach in my lungs, and her request carved into my bones. And from that moment on, every check I wrote, every bill I paid, wasn't just money. It was obedience. It was faithfulness. It was me trying to keep her alive through promises. But sitting in my study now, papers spread before me, I realized I hadn't protected Emily. I'd smothered her. I hadn't given her strength. I'd made her weaker. And Mark had been clever enough to grow fat in that shadow, mocking me while he lived off Grace's promise. The rain outside hammered harder, as though it too had lost patience with my silence. My phone buzzed on the desk. Emily's name lit up the screen. For years, I'd answered without hesitation. Tonight, I let it ring until the light went out. I closed the ledger but didn't put it back. I left it on the desk, its weight more final than any words I could say. The files were no longer records. They were weapons. I opened the top drawer and pulled out a blank legal pad. For a long time I stared at it, pen hovering above paper. Then, in slow, deliberate strokes, I wrote the first line. July 7th, the last day of silence. The words looked alien on the page, but they steadied me. I switched off the lamp. Only the glow of the streetlight spilled through the blinds, striping the folders in shadow. The rain drummed on, the watch ticked steady, and somewhere deep in my chest, the silence cracked into resolve. Tomorrow, this cage would no longer be mine. It would be theirs. And when the collapse came, it wouldn't whisper. It would roar. The first domino didn't just fall on Monday morning. I had felt it wobbling all weekend. After leaving the study Friday night, I sat with my coffee at the kitchen table, staring at the files. The rain outside had finally stopped, leaving the air heavy and metallic, like the smell after lightning. I knew the calls would come, but I wasn't going to wait for them. I pulled the ledger closer, lined the bills like soldiers across the desk, and opened my notebook. The watch ticked beside me, my metronome, my witness. "Bank of Hawthorne, this is Denise. How can I help you today?" "I need to terminate an external transfer," I said. "Mortgage assistance to 14 Hawthorne Lane. Verification questions. Keystrokes tapping. Transfer canceled. Confirmation number ending in 482. I wrote it down, circled it twice. Insurance, school, utilities. Each call had the same rhythm. Confirm, cancel, record. With every code I scribbled, the house grew quieter, as if the walls themselves were listening. At 11:15, Emily's name flashed on my phone. I let it ring once, then answered, "Dad, the bank says the mortgage bounced." "It didn't bounce," I said calmly. "It was pulled. By me. It's yours now." Her breath stuttered. "You can't just—" "I already did." I kept my voice steady. "You and Mark will have to carry your own house. I'll always take care of Lily and Noah. But this part? This part belongs to you." The line went silent, only her shaky breathing. Then she hung up. By noon, 6 lines were crossed out in my notebook. At 12:47, Mark came through, his voice sharp and clipped. "You can't destroy a family because your feelings got bruised at dinner." "I'm not destroying anything," I replied. "I'm just no longer hiding the cost." He started to spit another threat, then stopped. I heard only the hiss of his breath before the call cut. The last call I made was to my financial advisor. "Redirect those transfers," I said. "Put them into the retirement account I ignored for 15 years. He whistled low. "It'll feel strange at first." "It already does," I said, closing the notebook. The page looked like a map out of a prison I'd built for myself. On Monday, the consequences began to surface. The house phone rang first, its sharp bell slicing through the quiet. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, my cell buzzed with a text from Emily. "Dad, the mortgage payment bounced. Bank called. What happened? Call me ASAP." I stared at the screen, coffee cooling in my hand. For 15 years, every bill had been invisible to them, paid before they even noticed. Now, with the safety net gone, they were feeling the ground for the first time. By Tuesday, the cracks widened. Another message, this time from Mark, shorter and harder. "Fix this. Don't play games with my family." I didn't reply. Instead, I slipped my watch back onto my wrist. Its tick was steady against the chaos unraveling elsewhere. That afternoon, I drove past their house. The lawn was still perfectly trimmed, the shutters freshly painted, but there was an envelope stuck to the front door. From the street, I could read the bold black letters, "Notice of default." For the first time, the house didn't look like theirs. It looked borrowed, a stage set about to be struck. On Wednesday, the storm hit harder. A call from Noah's school. The woman on the line, polite but firm, explained the tuition payment had failed. Unless it was resolved by Friday, Lily and Noah wouldn't be allowed back after the weekend. In the background, I could hear children shouting, their laughter colliding with the sternness of her voice. I closed my eyes, pinched the bridge of my nose. "I understand," I told her quietly. "Thank you for letting me know." That evening, Emily showed up at my door. Her eyes were swollen, mascara smudged, rain dots clinging to her hair. She didn't wait for me to invite her in, just pushed past, clutching her purse like a lifeline. "Dad," she whispered, "what are you doing? The mortgage, the school, everything's falling apart." I let her words hang in the air, then motioned toward the study. She followed, reluctant, as though she already sensed what was waiting there. When she saw the folders spread across my desk, her breath caught. "All of this?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Every check," I said softly. "Every bill. 15 years, Emily. I kept you afloat. While Mark strutted around, while you pretended not to notice, I was paying. Almost $1 million. And tonight, well, it's no longer my responsibility." She sank into the chair across from me, silent tears running down her face. "But you promised Mom." "I promised I'd keep you safe," I cut in. "I didn't promise to keep you blind." Her phone buzzed on the desk. Mark's name lit up the screen. She silenced it without answering. That was when it hit me. Emily wasn't just fighting me. She was fighting the truth, and the truth was already winning. Thursday brought spectacle. The morning sun glared off wet pavement as I watered the plants out front. I'd felt this one coming too, the moment when their private collapse would become public. The low rumble of a diesel engine broke the quiet. A tow truck rolled up their driveway. The grinding of chains and the hiss of hydraulics echoed down the street as the BMW, Mark's pride, his trophy, was lifted off the ground. Neighbors peeked through blinds, murmurs spilling like wildfire. Mark stormed out of the house in sweatpants, hair uncombed, shouting, "There's been a mistake, I can pay!" But the driver just handed him paperwork and kept winching. From my porch, unseen, I watched the car roll away. Mark stood there, jaw tight, fists balled, the king stripped of his crown in broad daylight. Even Emily stayed inside, curtains trembling. By Friday, Emily called again, her voice hoarse. "Dad, please, the kids, they don't understand." Lily asked if she did something wrong. Noah cried himself to sleep. I swallowed hard, the words clawing at my throat. The kids are innocent, and I'll never let them suffer. But you and Mark... I paused, steadying myself. You need to feel this. You need to live without the net. Otherwise, you'll never grow. There was silence on the line, broken only by Emily's sob. Then she whispered, "He blames you, you know. He's telling everyone you abandoned us." I looked at the folders on my desk, the truth stacked in neat piles. Then let him. The truth doesn't need me to defend it. It will speak for itself. That night, I sat alone in my living room, the house humming with quiet. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled like damp pavement. My watch ticked on, a steady reminder that time doesn't pause for denial or excuses, and as I closed my eyes, I knew this was just the beginning. The collapse wasn't finished. It was only gathering speed. Tomorrow, the whispers would grow louder, the walls tighter, and for the first time in 15 years, I wasn't the one holding them up. By Saturday morning, I already knew the story wasn't mine anymore. Word has a way of leaking through walls, of running faster than truth itself. I felt it in the stiff nods of neighbors as I walked down the driveway to collect the newspaper, in the way Mrs. Harlow across the street waved too brightly, her smile just a little too stretched. "Morning. David," she called out, her voice sugared. I raised the paper in my hand. Morning. But just as I turned, I caught her husband lean close, whispering something in her ear. They thought I couldn't hear, but I've lived long enough to know the sound of gossip disguised as concern. At the grocery store earlier that day, it had been the same. I'd walked past the butcher's counter, and two women standing near the deli stopped mid-sentence. One cleared her throat, the other shifted her cart aside like she was suddenly very interested in cereal boxes. But their eyes lingered. They knew. Everyone knew. Money troubles don't stay quiet. They don't need to be announced. They announce themselves. Halfway down the baking aisle, it finally came to a head. Nancy Miller, a woman who once asked me to fix her fence post, steered her cart straight into mine. "David," she said, voice sharp enough to draw looks from the cereal shelf. "How could you? Cutting off your own daughter like that? What would Grace think?" A ripple of silence spread outward. Even the cashier at the end of the row froze with a loaf of bread in his hands. I set a jar of coffee back on the shelf, turned to face her fully. Grace would think 15 years and nearly $1 million was enough sacrifice for any one man. The number landed like a stone in a pond. Whispers rippled. "$1 million?" someone muttered. Nancy's face reddened, but she had no comeback. I left my cart where it was, carried only the coffee in my hand, and walked out. The automatic doors sighed shut behind me, but I could still feel the stairs burning between my shoulder blades. By afternoon, the neighborhood cookout was in full swing. From my window, I could see smoke rising from half a dozen grills, smell the sweet tang of barbecue sauce mixing with the sharpness of burning charcoal. Music floated from a portable speaker, classic rock, tinny but loud. Kids zigzagged between yards, their laughter shrill and careless, ketchup dripping down their wrists. Someone popped open a can of beer, the fizz loud as a firecracker. On any other weekend, it would have been a harmless picture of suburban comfort. Today, it felt like a stage, and I knew who the lead actor would be. I stepped outside, the July heat pressing heavy against my skin. Sweat gathered under my collar almost immediately. As I made my way down the sidewalk, I felt conversations dim, the volume drop just enough to notice. A few polite nods, a couple of "Hey there, David," followed by eyes that darted elsewhere. Mr. Jenkins from 3 doors down lifted his beer toward me. "Tough week, huh?" he said, then flushed red as his wife elbowed him. I forced a thin smile. Something like that. Further ahead, near the center of the cul-de-sac, Mark had already claimed his post by the fence. A bottle of beer dangled from his hand, and his voice cut above the rest, like a man auditioning for sympathy. "You wouldn't believe it," he declared, his tone just loud enough to carry. "The man just cut us off. Out of nowhere. No warning. Who does that to his own daughter?" There it was, the headline version of my life. Emily stood beside him, arms crossed, her eyes locked on the ground. Her silence screamed louder than his theatrics. A woman near me muttered to her husband, "I heard the BMW got hauled away, right in front of everyone." "And the kids?" Another chimed in. "Out of private school just like that. Poor things." I picked up a paper plate, scooped on ribs and coleslaw I had no appetite for, and found a seat under the oak tree. From there I could watch it all, the theater, the murmurs, the judgment. Mark lifted his beer, jabbing the air like a preacher with scripture. "I gave everything for that woman's daughter," he cried. "And what do I get? Betrayal. From her own father." The crowd murmured, some shaking their heads in pity, others nodding as if to say, "What a shame." My jaw clenched. I didn't move. The watch ticked steady on my wrist, grounding me. Then fate decided to intervene. A breeze stirred, playful at first, then stronger, rattling napkins and paper plates. The folder I had tucked under my arm, habit more than intention, shifted. One sheet slipped free, fluttered across the grass, and landed near Mrs. Carter's sandals. She bent down, picked it up, squinted. "Wait," she said, her voice sharp with surprise. "This is a mortgage bill, paid by David?" Heads turned, eyes sharpened. Before I could step forward, another gust caught the folder. A scatter of pages lifted into the air, drifting like autumn leaves. Kids squealed, racing to catch them. A boy with mustard on his shirt grabbed one and shouted, "Mom, look at this!" Soon, half a dozen neighbors were huddled around the picnic table, pages spread across the plastic cloth. Mortgage statements, tuition checks, medical bills, all with my signature stamped at the bottom. Emily's head snapped up. Her eyes locked on one bold number, 976,200. The blood drained from her face. "Dad," she whispered, the words breaking. "You brought the files?" I didn't answer. I let the papers speak. The crowd shifted. Whispers. Sharper this time. "Almost $1 million? He's been paying all of it? And Mark called him a loser?" Mark's face flushed crimson. "That's not, he's twisting it. He's making it look worse than it is." But the tide had turned. Emily covered her face, shoulders trembling. Lily tugged at her dress, whispering, "Mom, what's happening?" Noah clutched her hand, wide-eyed, confused. I gathered the pages into a neat stack, closed the folder gently, and stood. My voice carried steady, even as Mark sputtered. "No, Mark, I didn't hold this over you. I carried it for you. While you laughed, while you boasted, while you pretended this life was yours to brag about. I carried it, and tonight, I put it down." Silence fell across the yard. Even the children stopped running, their laughter choked into unease. The hiss of meat on the grill and the pop of a soda can cracked open nearby sounded louder than they should have. Emily's tears streaked her face, and in that instant, denial cracked. Not anger, not defense. Just the slow, painful recognition that the man she'd been standing beside was not the provider she had believed him to be. I didn't stay for the awkward silence that followed, for the burnt burgers passed around to cover embarrassment, for the neighbors trying to stitch small talk over a wound too deep. I set my plate aside, untouched, walked back across the street, and closed my door behind me. Inside, my phone buzzed almost immediately. Messages flooded in, some sympathetic, some nosy, a few apologetic. That night, the rumors spilled beyond the cul-de-sac. A friend of mine, Mr. Jenkins, later told me what happened at O'Malley's bar. Mark had gone there to lick his wounds, ordering round after round, trying to salvage pride in front of old work buddies. He started his usual bragging, Bonuses, promotions, the BMW. Until Carl, the man who leased him that very car, set down his glass and asked, "Funny thing, Mark, didn't David co-sign that lease?" The room went quiet. Mark blustered, denied, tried to laugh it off. But Carl wasn't smiling. "Paperwork doesn't lie," he said. "Half this town knows whose name kept that car in your driveway." Jenkins said Mark left in silence, his swagger trailing behind him like smoke. None of it mattered. The truth was out now, but the storm wasn't finished. Gossip spreads faster than facts, and Mark wasn't done. If anything, this was the moment he'd double down. The next battle wouldn't be whispered over barbecue, it would be shouted in the open. The house was too quiet after the cookout. I'd shut the blinds, but whispers still seeped through the walls, clinging like smoke after a fire. The gossip didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the weight in my chest. The old weight. The one I'd carried since the night Grace slipped away. I walked upstairs to the bedroom we once shared. The sheets were neatly tucked, the air faintly scented with lavender from a sachet Grace had placed in the dresser years ago. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the photograph on the nightstand. Grace smiling, sunlight catching her hair. The memory rose up before I could stop it. It wasn't just the hospital I remembered. It was the weeks leading to it. One night, years earlier, Grace and I had sat at this very bed. Emily had just dropped by with Mark, and after they left, Grace sighed heavily, her shoulders slumping. "She's not ready for life on her own," she said. "She leans on you too much. On us." I had bristled. "She's our daughter. We're supposed to be there for her." "There's being there," Grace answered, her voice firm but sad. "And then there's carrying her. If we carry her forever, she'll never stand." We didn't agree that night. I remember turning away, muttering something about her being too hard on Emily. And yet, when Grace lay in that hospital bed months later, frail and fading, her words had softened into something else. The room smelled of antiseptic and wilted flowers, the air too heavy with endings. Machines hummed steadily, the beeps like a countdown clock. Grace's hand was frail in mine, her skin almost translucent, her pulse faint but steady. "David," she whispered, her voice dry, cracking. "Promise me." I leaned closer, swallowing back tears. "Anything. Don't let Emily struggle. She's not strong enough. She needs help. Promise me you'll keep her safe." I remember nodding too quickly, desperate to give her peace. "I promise. I'll take care of her. I'll take care of them all." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Good man," she breathed, before her eyes fluttered closed. The beeping slowed. My world tilted. And in that instant, the promise became law. For 15 years, I lived inside those words. Every check, every payment, every sacrifice. I told myself I was keeping Emily safe, honoring Grace's wish. But tonight, as I sat staring at the photo, I wondered if I had misunderstood. Keeping her safe? Did that mean shielding her from every hardship? Or did it mean teaching her to face hardship without collapsing? I stood and walked back to the study, the watch ticking steady on my wrist. I opened the ledger again, running my finger down the long column of expenses. Nearly $1 million, a lifetime of Grace's words, misinterpreted. The doorbell rang. When I opened it, Emily was there, shoulders slumped, mascara smeared again. She looked younger somehow, like the little girl who once ran to me after scraping her knees on the playground. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking. "Why? Why now? Why pull the rug out like this?" I stepped aside, letting her in. She didn't sit. She stood stiff in the center of the room, clutching her purse like it was armor. "I promised your mother I'd keep you safe," I said quietly. Her eyes filled with tears. "And this is keeping me safe? Watching my kids suffer? Losing everything?" Her voice climbed higher, desperation edging into anger. "Do you have any idea what Lily said last night? She asked if she'd done something wrong. She thought this was her fault." The words stabbed deeper than any insult Mark had thrown at me. My throat tightened. Still, I forced myself to answer. No, Emily. This isn't their fault. It's never theirs. But you need to feel this. You need to face it. Otherwise, you'll never grow. She shook her head, tears falling freely. You don't understand. Mark, he's furious. He's telling everyone you abandoned us. And now this. I cut in gently but firmly. He's blamed me for years, Emily. That's nothing new. But ask yourself, what has he carried? What has he sacrificed? Who signed the checks while he strutted around pretending? Her lips trembled. He'll never accept this. He'll never forgive you. I let out a bitter laugh. Forgive me? For carrying him? For giving him 15 years he never earned? I leaned forward, lowering my voice. This isn't about Mark. This is about you. You've got to decide if you'll keep hiding behind him, or if you'll finally step out and face life yourself. For the first time, she wavered. She sank into the chair across from me, hands covering her face. Her sobs filled the room, raw and aching. Mom wouldn't want this, she choked. I leaned closer. Your mom wanted you to survive. She wanted you to grow. She wanted me to protect you, yes. But she never wanted me to buy your life for you. There's a difference. The silence that followed was heavy, but necessary. Finally, Emily lifted her head, her eyes red and swollen. So what happens now? I tapped the ledger with my finger. Now you and Mark stand on your own. I'll always be here for Lily and Noah. They're children. They're innocent. But you and Mark? You need to feel the weight of your own choices. She wiped her face with trembling hands, stood slowly, and nodded. Not agreement. Not forgiveness. Just acknowledgement. Then she left without another word. I sat long after the door closed, the tick of my watch echoing in the silence. My chest ached, but beneath the ache was something new. Clarity. I walked back upstairs, lifted the photograph of Grace, and whispered into the quiet. I promised to keep her safe, and I will, just not like this anymore. The house was still. Outside, the rain had finally eased, leaving the air cool, damp, and clean. But inside my chest, the storm still raged, and I knew it was only the beginning. Because Mark would not take this lying down. The next time we faced each other, it wouldn't be in whispers or tears. It would be war. But while I sat in silence, Emily faced her own. At 12:17 a.m., in a kitchen lit only by the glow of her phone screen, she began to punch numbers into a calculator app. The house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the tick of the wall clock. Take home, $6,850, she whispered. Mortgage, $2,860, insurance, $340, utilities, $310, groceries, $590, gas, $220, car payment, $370. The total left her $160 to spare, until she added the children. Lily's activities, $75, Noah's League, $110, co-pays, clothes, school drives, birthdays. The margin vanished. Negative, always negative. Her hand trembled as she scribbled the numbers on a scrap of paper. Tears splashed onto the ink, blurring the figures. We can't even afford air, she muttered. A sound on the stairs. Lily, hair tangled from sleep, clutching a stuffed rabbit. Mom? Why are you crying? Emily wiped her face quickly. I'm not, honey. Go back to bed. Are we losing our house? Lily asked, her voice small and frightened. Emily pulled her close, hugging her so tight the girl squirmed. No, baby. Not if I can help it. She smoothed Lily's hair, but her eyes stayed fixed on the cruel red number glowing on her phone. When Lily padded back upstairs, Emily sat alone, staring at the page. And in that dark kitchen, for the first time, she began to see what David meant by feeling the weight. The house had been still all morning, the kind of silence that presses into your chest and makes every tick of a clock feel louder. Outside, I could hear children laughing somewhere down the block, their voices rising and falling in carefree bursts. The sound only made the walls of my house feel emptier. I had tried to read, but the words slipped past me. Tried to water the plants, but my hands moved without thought. By noon, I was just sitting in the armchair, staring at nothing, when the knock came. It was light, hesitant. Not the pounding of a bill collector, not the angry rap of Mark demanding answers. Softer, unsure. When I opened the door, Lily and Noah stood there, backpacks slung over their shoulders, sneakers splattered with mud from the walk. Emily lingered at the curb, pretending to scroll her phone. But I knew she had sent them. "Grandpa?" Lily said, her eyes wide. "Can we stay a while?" I stepped aside immediately. "Of course. Come in." The smell of rain and playground dirt followed them into the house. They kicked off their shoes in the entryway. Noah leaving one toppled sideways, Lily neatly lining hers against the wall. Small habits that spoke volumes. Lily drifted toward the living room, fingers brushing the spines of my old books, while Noah collapsed onto the couch, clutching a pillow like it might protect him. I went to the kitchen, squeezed lemons the way Grace used to, stirring in sugar until the mixture caught the light. I even added a sprig of mint, remembering how she always claimed it made the taste linger. The smell of citrus filled the air, sharp and fresh, chasing away the musty quiet of the house. When I set the lemonade and cookies down, they dug in greedily. Crumbs scattered across the table. Their chatter filled the silence that had gnawed at these rooms for days. For a moment, it felt like old times, like Grace was still in the kitchen, humming while Emily did her homework at the table. It didn't last long. "Grandpa," Noah asked suddenly, his mouth half full of cookie, "Dad says you don't love us anymore. Is that true?" The words stole the air from my lungs. My throat tightened. I set my glass down carefully. "No, buddy. That's not true at all. I love you both more than anything." Lily looked up, her gaze sharper than a child's should be. "Then why does Mom cry every night now? She thinks we don't hear, but we do. Is it because you stopped paying for stuff?" Her voice trembled on the last words, as though even asking them felt wrong. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. Sometimes, loving someone doesn't mean giving them everything. Sometimes it means teaching them to stand on their own. Lily frowned, trying to process. Noah tilted his head. "But wasn't it you? Weren't you the one who paid for the house, the school, the car?" I swallowed hard. "How do you know that?" Lily exchanged a glance with her brother. "We heard Mom and Dad fighting. Dad said you were showing everyone receipts. He was mad. But Mom, she didn't yell back. She just cried." Their innocence made the truth heavier than any insult. They weren't supposed to carry this weight, but here they were, piecing together the fragments their parents dropped. "Does money mean love?" Noah asked softly, almost to himself. I shook my head. "No. Love is making sure you're safe, yes, but it's also making sure you know how to stand on your own 2 feet. Money helps, but it isn't love. Love is what stays even when money doesn't." Lily's brow furrowed. "So, does that mean Mom lied?" The question cut like glass. I leaned closer. "No, sweetheart. Your mom is hurting. Sometimes when people hurt, they say things that aren't the whole truth. That doesn't make them liars. It makes them human." She sat back slowly, her young mind wrestling with words that shouldn't belong to children. Noah hugged the pillow tighter. Behind them, Emily finally came inside. She stood in the doorway, face drawn, eyes rimmed red. She didn't speak, didn't dare interrupt. But when Lily turned to her and said, "Mom, Grandpa just wanted us to be safe," Emily's shoulders crumpled. She sank into the armchair, hands trembling. Lily got up, walked over, and wrapped her arms around her mother's waist. Noah shuffled closer, resting his small hand on hers. Emily let out a sob, the kind she had held back too long. "I know," she whispered. "I know, baby." Her voice cracked. For the first time, the children had said aloud what she couldn't. I cleared my throat. Here's what I can promise. Lily, Noah, I will always take care of you. School, food, clothes, you'll never go without. But your parents, they need to learn how to take care of themselves. That part isn't mine anymore. Emily's tears spilled again. She opened her mouth, closed it, then finally nodded. Lily reached across the coffee table, laying her small hand over mine. Thank you, Grandpa. The simple words nearly broke me. Gratitude, pure, unclouded, so different from the entitlement I had endured for years. I glanced at Emily. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw not just shame but a flicker of resolve. She wanted to believe she could stand. When it was time to leave, I walked them to the door. Noah turned back, backpack bouncing against his shoulders. Does this mean Dad has to say sorry? The corners of my mouth twitched. Yes, I said softly. One day he will. They stepped out into the fading light. Lily waved once before slipping her hand into her mother's. Emily didn't look back. I stayed on the porch, the evening sun casting long shadows across the street. Their figures grew smaller with every step, until they disappeared around the corner. Inside, the house returned to silence. But this silence was different. It carried something alive inside it, something children had left behind. Because if Lily and Noah could see the truth so clearly, sooner or later, Mark would have to face it too. And when that moment came, it wouldn't be whispered in my living room. It would be demanded, in front of everyone. 3 nights after the children's visit, the storm came to my doorstep. It began with the screech of tires outside, rubber burning against asphalt. I'd been sitting in the living room, lamp dim, ledger still on the table, when I heard heavy footsteps crunching across the gravel. Then the pounding, fist after fist against the door, so hard the frame shuddered. Emily's voice floated up from the street, tight and desperate. Mark, please, don't... But her words were swallowed by another round of pounding. I opened the door before he could break it down. Mark barged in, reeking of whiskey, his tie hanging loose, shirt untucked. His eyes were bloodshot, his face flushed with rage. Emily trailed behind, pale, her lips pressed thin with dread. You think you can humiliate me? He snarled, jabbing a finger so close to my chest I could feel the heat of it. In front of the whole damn neighborhood? Showing those files like some kind of martyr? You made me look weak. I stayed calm, stepping back just enough for him to stumble into the living room. You don't need my help to look weak, Mark. You've managed that just fine on your own. Emily flinched, but she didn't defend him. Mark's laugh was bitter, jagged. You think this is over? You think cutting us off makes you some hero? Let me tell you something, old man. My family, my kids, they're not going to suffer because of your stubborn pride. I crossed my arms. No, Mark, they won't suffer. Because I'll take care of them. But you? You'll face what you've built, or what you haven't built. His jaw tightened. So what? You just get to decide the terms? You're holding us hostage with your money. I shook my head slowly. No. I'm setting conditions for dignity. And if you can't meet them, then the gravy train is over for good. Emily's voice broke through, barely above a whisper. Dad, what do you mean? I walked to my desk, lifted the ledger, and placed it on the coffee table between us. The weight of it thudded against the wood. Here's my ultimatum. If you want me to continue supporting the kids, just the kids, then both of you need to do 3 things. Mark scoffed, rolling his eyes. Here we go. 1, I said firmly, you write public letters of apology. To me, yes, but also to this community. You've let them believe I abandoned you. You'll correct that lie. People need to know the truth. Emily swallowed hard. Letters? Yes. Posted on Facebook, mailed to the neighbors, signed by both of you, transparent, honest. Mark threw his hands up. That's insane. 2, I continued, ignoring him. You acknowledge, in writing, every dollar I spent. All $976,200 of it. You admit it wasn't your success that built your lifestyle. It was my sacrifice. Mark's face turned crimson. Never. I'll never give you that satisfaction. Emily sat silent, tears welling. And 3, I said, lowering my voice. You say thank you. Not in private, not whispered, out loud, in front of your kids, in front of me, and in front of this neighborhood. Genuine. No excuses. I wasn't demanding money back. I wasn't asking for favors. All I wanted was truth and gratitude. And I knew those 2 things would cost Mark more than any dollar ever could. Mark exploded. You're out of your mind. You want to strip me of my pride? Parade me around like a dog begging scraps? Forget it. I leaned forward, eyes locked on his. You already parade yourself, Mark. You strut in cars you didn't pay for, live in a house you didn't earn, drink wine bought with my checks. The only difference now is the mask is gone. This isn't about stripping your pride. It's about exposing the lie you built it on. Emily's voice cracked through the shouting. Stop it, both of you. She turned on him. He's right. We've been living a lie. Her words silenced the room more than mine ever could. Mark blinked at her, betrayal written across his face. You're siding with him now? Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm siding with reality. We're drowning, Mark, and you keep pretending the water isn't rising. For a heartbeat, his shoulders sagged. But pride flared again, quick and venomous. He jabbed a finger at me. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching me grovel. I stood, straightening to my full height. Groveling is begging for what you don't deserve. I'm asking you to own what you do deserve, the truth. If you can't do that, then you lose everything. Not just my support, my respect, my presence. And when Lily and Noah ask why, I'll tell them because their father refused to say thank you. The words landed heavier than any fist. Emily collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. Mark paced, muttering curses, fists clenching and unclenching. Finally, he stopped, eyes blazing. How long? 48 hours, I said evenly. 2 days. You have until then to decide. After that, the only support left will be for Lily and Noah. You and Emily? You'll be on your own. Mark laughed, harsh and hollow. You think you can break me with ultimatums? You'll regret this. I stepped closer, lowering my voice until it was nearly a whisper. No, Mark. You'll regret not taking it. Emily lifted her tear-streaked face, looking between us. She didn't argue, didn't beg. She just whispered, 2 days. They left soon after. The door slammed so hard the frame rattled, leaving the air quivering in its wake. Through the window, I saw Mark stalk to the car, yanking the door open so violently it nearly tore from its hinge. He muttered curses, half to himself, half to the night air. The engine roared, headlights cutting across my lawn like twin blades before the tires screeched into the dark. Emily hesitated on the curb. For a moment she stood frozen, clutching her purse with both hands, shoulders shaking. I could almost hear her thoughts. 48 hours? And then what? She climbed in beside Mark, but her face turned toward the glass, away from him. Inside, I sank back into the armchair. The house felt too large, the silence too sharp. Only the tick of my watch filled the room. Each second now carried weight. 48 hours, 47 hours, and 59 minutes. Somewhere across town, Emily sat in the passenger seat staring at her phone, the spreadsheet from the night before still glowing faintly on the screen. Negative balance. Red numbers. The image blurred as her eyes filled again. She closed the app, but the math followed her. Every beat of her heart, another subtraction. In that moment, I knew. The countdown wasn't just mine. It belonged to all of us. Mark, fighting pride. Emily, fighting fear. And me, fighting the ghost of a promise. I sat back down, staring at the ledger still on the table. The ticking of my watch filled the silence, louder with each second. I thought of Grace, of the promise that had guided 15 years of my life. Would she see this ultimatum as cruel, or as the only way left to keep Emily truly safe? The seconds ticked by, steady and merciless. In 48 hours, either Mark would bend or he would break, and whichever way it went, the reckoning would be public. 48 hours crawled by like years. I spent them pacing the house, the steady tick of my watch marking each second closer to the deadline. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Grace in that hospital bed, whispering her request. Keep her safe. And every time I wondered if what I was about to do was keeping Emily safe, or throwing her to the wolves. Saturday afternoon, the answer came knocking. It wasn't one polite ring. The doorbell blared over and over, followed by the dull thud of fists against wood. I straightened, my chest tight, and opened the door. They were all there. Mark stood in front, jaw set tight, shoulders squared like a man marching into battle. His shirt was pressed, his hair combed, over-prepared, like presentation day at the office. But the stiffness couldn't hide the tremor in his hand. Emily hovered beside him, weary and trembling, eyes darting as though she wanted to vanish. And behind them, Lily and Noah, clutching each other's hands, eyes too wide for children their age. I called the neighbors, Emily whispered. They're outside. They're waiting. I stepped onto the porch, and the sight stole my breath. Half the cul-de-sac had gathered across the lawns. Clusters of people leaned on fences, stood with arms folded, or sat on porch steps. Murmurs buzzed like insects on a summer night. A few phones already glimmered in their hands, recording, ready to capture the fall of whoever stumbled first. Some faces were curious, some cold, some sympathetic. A boy tugged his mother's sleeve, whispering, "What's happening?" She hushed him, but her eyes never left us. Mark cleared his throat, the sound rough. "We're here," he muttered. "Let's get this over with." I nodded, motioning to the small table I had set on the porch. On it lay the folder of receipts, the ledger, and a single blank sheet of paper with a pen. "You know the conditions," I said. Mark bristled. "You're really going to make me do this circus act?" Emily's hand touched his arm. "Please, Mark. For the kids." For a long moment, he just stared at Lily and Noah. Their hands were still clasped tight, their eyes fixed on him. Something flickered across his face. Not remorse, not yet, but the realization that this wasn't only his humiliation. It was their memory in the making. He grabbed the pen like it was a weapon, scrawled his name on the draft letter I had prepared. His handwriting was jagged, angry, but it was there. The murmurs rose. The crowd pressed closer. Then came the words. Mark turned, his voice flat at first. "For years, I lived off David's support. Every mortgage payment, every tuition bill, every luxury, we didn't earn it. He did." His throat bobbed as he swallowed. "And I repaid him with arrogance and disrespect. For that, I'm sorry." The neighbors shifted, a few gasps, a ripple of whispers, phones angled higher. Mark faltered, his lips tightened, fighting pride with every syllable. He glanced at Emily, who nodded through tears. Then his eyes found Lily and Noah. Their faces, frightened, expectant, innocent, broke something in him. His voice cracked. "I was wrong," he whispered. Then louder. "I was wrong, and I'm grateful. David, thank you for everything." The words hit me like a bell tolling after years of silence. For 15 years, I had carried the truth in shadows. And now here it was, spoken aloud. Not by me, but by the man who once mocked me as a loser. Emily stepped forward next, wiping her cheeks with shaking hands. Her voice trembled, but she didn't falter. "Dad, I let myself believe dependency was love. I let Mark's pride blind me. I'm sorry. Thank you for never giving up on me, even when I didn't deserve it." Tears blurred my vision as Lily and Noah broke free from her grasp and rushed into my arms. Lily clung to me, whispering, "Thank you, Grandpa." Noah echoed her, his small voice muffled against my chest. The crowd's response was awkward at first. Soft claps, murmurs of astonishment. But it grew, spreading into something more. Not applause for me, but for the moment itself. For masks stripped away. For truth finally standing naked in daylight. I caught snippets as neighbors turned to one another. All this time, it was David. I can't believe we didn't see it. Almost $1 million? And he called him a loser? Mr. Jenkins approached, his expression sheepish. "David," he said, low enough for only me to hear, "I owe you an apology. I judged wrong. We all did." Another woman added, "That BMW being towed, we thought you were cruel. I see it now. You weren't." I nodded, unable to find words, holding my grandchildren tighter. On the porch, Mark stood apart, shoulders slumped, his pride cracked open like a shell. For once, he didn't bluster or spit venom. He looked smaller, stripped of armor. Emily reached for his hand. This time, he didn't pull away. I lifted my wrist, the worn leather strap of my old watch pressing into my skin. I turned it in my hand, feeling the weight of it, the weight of time itself. Grace's voice seemed to echo through the air. "Keep her safe," I whispered back. "I did, Grace. Just not the way I thought." The crowd dispersed slowly, whispers shifting from judgment to sympathy. Some patted my shoulder, others nodded in quiet respect. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the man hiding in the background of his own family. Later that evening, the house was warm with the smell of apple pie, store-bought, but heated in the oven. Emily and the kids sat with me at the kitchen table. Lily giggled at something Noah said, crumbs scattering from her plate. Laughter, soft, real laughter, filled the air for the first time in far too long. Mark sat apart, staring at his hands. The silence around him was heavy, but it wasn't hostile. It was contemplative. Finally, he spoke, voice raw. "I don't know how to fix all of this, but I'll try. For them. For you." It wasn't redemption. Not yet. But it was a beginning. I looked at my grandchildren's faces glowing in the lamplight and felt the storm inside me ease. I realized then the revenge had never been about destruction. It had been about transformation, about forcing the truth into the light. And in that truth, maybe, just maybe, we could finally start to heal. There are nights when the silence in my house feels louder than any words. The kind of silence that creeps into the corners, fills the cracks, and settles heavy on my shoulders. On those nights, I ask myself, did I really keep my promise to Grace, or did I hide behind it? The watch ticks on my wrist, steady and merciless. It was hers once, and sometimes I imagine her hand still warm in mine, urging me forward. For years, I thought love meant carrying every burden alone. I thought keeping Emily safe meant shielding her from pain, from mistakes, from life itself. But maybe real love is something harder. The courage to let others stumble so they can learn to stand. I sit by the window and let the night air drift in. The street outside is quiet now. The same lawns that once buzzed with gossip lying still under the porch lights. I wonder if the neighbors ever think back to that afternoon. The apologies, the tears, the words Mark was forced to say out loud. Do they remember me as the quiet old man who finally spoke? Or as the fool who carried nearly $1 million worth of secrets? Sometimes, in the hush of night, I hear Grace's voice as if she's sitting across from me. "David, keep her safe." I whisper back. I tried. God knows I tried. But maybe keeping her safe meant more than paying bills. Maybe it meant teaching her to fight. Emily visits more often now. She doesn't always say much, but she lingers longer. Sometimes she brings Lily and Noah, and the kids sprawl on my rug with coloring books, their laughter soft and healing. Emily will sit at the kitchen table, eyes tired but steadier, sipping tea while I cook. Once, she caught me staring and said, I'm trying, Dad. It was only 3 words, but I believed her. Mark. He's harder to read. He avoids my eyes when he comes around, his pride still smoldering. But I've noticed small things. He doesn't strut the way he used to. His voice, once sharp with arrogance, has dulled to something quieter. I don't know if he will ever truly change. Pride has deep roots, but maybe, just maybe, he'll water something else this time. For his children's sake, if not his own. And that's the thing I've learned. Revenge, if it's real, isn't about destruction. It isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about pulling the truth into the light, even if it burns. For 15 years, silence was my cage. I thought it was sacrifice, but it was fear. Fear of what would happen if anyone saw how much I had given, how much I had lost. Silence protected them, but it suffocated me. Breaking that silence was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it also set me free. If you've carried a secret weight for too long, maybe this story reminded you of something, or someone, you've been holding on to. A promise you made in love, but kept in fear. A silence you thought was safety but turned out to be a prison. I don't know what your burden is. Maybe it's family. Maybe it's debt. Maybe it's grief that lingers long after the world has moved on. But I do know this. You don't have to carry it forever. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't holding tighter. It's letting go. So I'll ask you what I ask myself on nights when the house is still. What truth are you hiding? What silence is choking you? And what would happen if you finally set it free? I'd love to hear what this story stirred in you. Not just for me, but for anyone else who might be walking through the same quiet battles tonight. Share your thoughts, your memories, your own promises, because you never know who might need to hear them. Thank you for sitting with me through this journey, for listening to the weight, the loss, the transformation. Wherever you are tonight, I hope your evening ends with peace, a little clarity, and maybe the courage to put down one thing that no longer belongs to you. Take care of yourselves, and may your nights close gently, with peace instead of regret.